The suburbs are a lie. They sell you on peace and quiet, on friendly neighbors and the gentle hum of a ride-on mower on a Saturday morning. What they don't tell you is that the peace is just the eerie silence between HOA complaint letters, and the friendly neighbors are mostly amateur spies cataloging the precise height of your hedges. For me, the lie was a necessary one. I needed the garage space. I needed the gigabit fiber connection that, for some reason, only serviced this particular pastel-colored purgatory called Maple Creek Estates. So I made a deal with the devil, and the devil's name was Brenda. I was enjoying a rare moment of manufactured tranquility on my back patio. The sun was warm. The coffee in my mug was a perfect 78 degrees Celsius, and my automated lawnmower, which I'd nicknamed the Blade Runner, was silently carving a perfect crosshatch pattern into the fescue. Through my augmented reality glasses, I monitored the internal temperature of the brisket I had smoking on the pellet grill. A little data overlay hovered in my vision. Core temp, 85 degrees Celsius. Stall phase, engaged. Estimated completion, 4 hours, 12 minutes. It was a perfect Saturday. Too perfect. My internal threat detection system, honed by 2 years of living in Maple Creek, began to prickle. I didn't even need to consult the perimeter sensors. I could feel the disturbance in the force. The gentle whirring wasn't my lawnmower. It was the electric motor of an approaching golf cart. The Beige Avenger. "Jarvis," I murmured, keeping my eyes on the smoker. "Yes, Alex?" The calm, British voice of my home AI spoke softly into my ear through a bone conduction implant. "Log incoming hostile. Proximity 30 feet and closing. Record all audio-visual data." "Acknowledged. Recording." The golf cart, the color of a bland biscuit, squeaked to a halt at the edge of my property line. Brenda sat behind the wheel, wearing her signature visor and a polo shirt the exact shade of disappointment. She held a clipboard like it was a holy text. "Alex," she said. Her voice could curdle milk from 50 paces. I took a slow sip of coffee. "Brenda, to what do I owe the pleasure? Did a leaf from my oak tree stray into your designated airspace?" She ignored my sarcasm, which was her superpower. "I'm here about the mailbox." I sighed. The mailbox. It had been my project last weekend. A sleek, brushed aluminum affair with a solar-powered LED address number and a package sensor that sent a notification to my phone. It was, in my humble opinion, a masterpiece of suburban engineering. "What about it?" I asked. "It is 38.2 inches tall," she said, consulting her notes. "Article 4, Section B, Paragraph 7 of the Maple Creek Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions clearly states that all mail receptacles must not exceed a height of 38 inches. I blinked. "You're giving me a citation over 2/10 of an inch?" "The rules are the rules," she said, a glimmer of triumph in her eyes. "Furthermore, the finish. It has a sheen. The bylaws are clear, semi-gloss, not satin. It's a blight on the architectural harmony of this community." I couldn't help it. I laughed. A real, actual laugh. It felt alien in this environment. "A blight? Brenda, your house is the color of oatmeal. The entire neighborhood looks like it was designed by a committee with a beige fetish. My mailbox is the most interesting thing on this entire block." Her face tightened. "You find this funny. You and your gadgets, your noisy flying things." She gestured vaguely at the sky. "I've had complaints. People are concerned. They feel watched. My flying things are quadcopters I use to survey my roof for leaks and check the gutters, Brenda. They're up for 5 minutes, twice a year. You spend more time than that staring at my lawn with binoculars. Who's watching whom?" She sniffed, marking a demerit on her clipboard with a sharp, angry stroke of her pen. "This is your final warning, Alex, about the mailbox, and about everything else. This community has standards." She put the golf cart in reverse, giving me one last withering glare before gliding away, a beige harbinger of bureaucratic doom. "I should program the lawnmower to spell out Bye Felicia in the grass next time she comes over," I muttered. "I can add it to the mowing schedule if you'd like," Jarvis offered. I grinned. "Tempting, but let's not escalate. Yet?" And that's when the smell hit me. It wasn't my brisket. That was a controlled, hickory-infused aroma. This was different, acrid, angry, the smell of burning plastic. My gaze snapped next door, to the Hendersons' house. A sweet, elderly couple, Mabel and George. They were the only reason I hadn't built a Faraday cage around my property. A thin, greasy plume of black smoke was curling up from their back deck. Before I could even process it, a sound cut through the quiet Saturday afternoon. The high-pitched, frantic shriek of a smoke alarm. My entire sensory experience shifted. The brisket data vanished from my glasses, replaced by a red-bordered alert. External fire alarm detected. Source, 1214 Maple Lane. A live feed from my southwest-facing security camera popped up in the corner of my vision. It showed the Hendersons' wooden deck. The base of their gas grill was engulfed in flames, licking greedily at the vinyl siding of their house. George Henderson, in all his 80-year-old glory, was frantically swatting at it with a broom. The broom was also on fire. "Oh, hell no," I said, standing up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. This was bad. The wind was blowing towards the house. That vinyl siding would go up like tissue paper. "Jarvis," I commanded, my voice sharp and clear. "Run protocol neighborly fireman." "Acknowledged," Jarvis replied instantly. "Emergency protocols engaged. Alerting local fire department. ETA 6 minutes. 6 minutes. I looked at the video feed. The flames were already reaching the eaves. They didn't have 6 minutes. "Not good enough," I said, starting from my garage. "Deploy Drone 1. Target the source of the blaze. Let's go, go, go." A quiet hum emanated from my roof. A section of shingles, indistinguishable from the rest, slid back to reveal a hidden bay. A sleek, white drone with red markings, Firefly 1, rose silently into the afternoon sky. In my vision, its camera feed became my primary display. I saw the world from its perspective, a clear thermal-enhanced view of the fire, the wind vectors, the optimal angle of approach. George had dropped the flaming broom and was now fumbling with a garden hose, which was tangled in a rose bush. Mabel was standing at the screen door, her hands over her mouth. This was it. This was why I put up with Brenda and the beige. My tech wasn't just for fun, it was for this. I guided the drone into position, its sophisticated nozzle primed, ready to deploy 20 gallons of concentrated eco-friendly fire suppressant foam. "Target locked," I murmured. "Engaging suppression system in 3, 2... And then my world went to static. 1 second, I was a god in the machine, piloting a sophisticated firefighting instrument with the precision of a surgeon. The next, I was blind. The crisp 4K video feed from Firefly 1 devolved into a blizzard of digital snow. A massive red banner flashed across my vision, screaming a message I had only ever seen in simulations. Critical signal interference. Flight controls unresponsive. "What? No, no, no," I muttered, frantically trying to re-establish a link. I toggled frequencies, boosted the signal gain. Nothing. The drone was still in the air. I could see it with my own eyes. But it was wobbling drunkenly. It had lost its brain, me, and was drifting aimlessly, a useless piece of high-tech plastic floating on the breeze while the Hendersons' house was about to be consumed. My mind raced. A solar flare? Some bizarre atmospheric disturbance? My system was hardened against nearly every conceivable type of interference. It was triple redundant, military grade. For it to fail this catastrophically, It couldn't be an accident. It had to be deliberate. "Jarvis, triangulate the source of the jamming signal, now!" "Triangulating." The AI's voice was clipped, efficient. A web of data points overlaid my vision of the neighborhood. Signal strength vectors converged, crossing over one another until they formed a single, undeniable point of origin. A point I knew all too well. Brenda's house. "You have got to be kidding me," I whispered, rage and disbelief warring for dominance. I activated the telescopic lens on my main security camera, zooming across the street. And there she was, standing on her perfectly manicured front porch, partially hidden behind a meticulously pruned boxwood. In her hands, she held a black device with a stubby antenna. It looked like a souped-up walkie-talkie from a spy movie. A signal jammer. She was aiming it right at my drone. A smug, triumphant little smile played on her lips. She wasn't just a petty tyrant obsessed with mailbox heights. She was a saboteur. She was actively, maliciously preventing me from putting out a fire that was seconds away from engulfing my neighbor's home. All because she hated my flying things. The rage won. A cold, clear fury settled over me. There was no time to confront her, no time to call the cops and explain. Every second, the flames climbed higher up the Henderson's wall. The vinyl siding was starting to buckle and melt. But Brenda had made one critical, Karen-level miscalculation. She assumed I was a hobbyist. She assumed I had one drone. She assumed I didn't have a contingency plan for a hyper-specific HOA president goes rogue scenario. I always have a contingency plan. "Jarvis," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "She's jamming the primary command frequency. She thinks she's won." "Her tactical analysis appears to be flawed," Jarvis noted dryly. "Indeed. Execute contingency protocol, Swarm. Launch the backup fleet. All channels, encrypted frequency hopping. Disregard FAA altitude advisories. Authorization code, Alpha Tango 9er. "Authorization accepted," Jarvis confirmed. "Executing protocol, Swarm." If Brenda thought one drone was a nuisance, she was about to have a very, very bad day. Around the eaves of my roofline, 5 hidden panels snapped open simultaneously. They were camouflaged so perfectly you could stand directly underneath them and never know they were there. From these bays, 5 smaller, faster, and far more aggressive-looking drones shot into the sky. They weren't elegant like Firefly 1. They were matte, black, angular, and built for speed and purpose. I called them the Fire Ants. They ascended in a tight, coordinated swarm, their electric motors emitting a low, angry buzz like a nest of disturbed hornets. They completely ignored the jamming field that had crippled their larger sibling. Their communication systems were a distributed mesh network, constantly hopping between thousands of encrypted frequencies a second. Brenda's little handheld jammer was like trying to stop a tidal wave with a bucket. I now had 5 distinct camera feeds in my display. I designated the Henderson's deck as a primary target zone. The swarm acknowledged instantly, banking in perfect unison and accelerating towards the fire in a V formation, like a squadron of miniature attack jets. Mr. Henderson had finally untangled his hose and was directing a pathetic trickle of water at the base of the inferno. The fire ants screamed in over his head. He looked up, his jaw dropping in bewildered awe. "Targets acquired," Jarvis announced. "Deploying suppressant." It was beautiful. It was chaos, perfectly choreographed. The 5 drones broke formation, each taking a different angle of attack. 2 went low, hitting the base of the fire at the grill. 2 went high, coating the melting vinyl siding and the eaves of the roof. The 5th one hovered directly overhead, dousing the top of the blaze. A thick, white torrent of foam erupted from the swarm, blanketing the deck in a matter of seconds. The angry orange flames sputtered. The black smoke turned to white steam. And then, As quickly as it had started, the fire was gone. All that remained was a dripping, foam-covered, and very charred mess. But the house was saved. The petunias were saved. I zoomed my camera back over to Brenda's porch. Her smug smile had vanished, replaced by an expression of slack-jawed shock. The jammer hung limply in her hand. She had brought a knife to a drone fight. In the distance, I could hear the first faint wail of approaching sirens. The party was just getting started. The professionals arrived in a cacophony of sirens and flashing lights that sent the neighborhood's dogs into a frenzy of panicked barking. A massive fire engine lumbered down our quiet suburban street, followed by 2 police cruisers. They were expecting a full-blown structure fire. What they found was me, calmly recalling my fire ants to their charging bays, and a bewildered George Henderson standing on a deck that looked like it had been attacked by a giant can of shaving cream. The firefighters, clad in their heavy gear, stormed the deck with axes and hoses, only to stop in their tracks, utterly confused. The captain, a man with a mustache that could command a small army, took off his helmet and scratched his head. What happened here?" he asked, looking from the charred wall to the thick layer of foam. George, bless his heart, pointed a shaky finger at me. "Alex! It was Alex! He has these little spaceship things. They just flew in and poof, the fire was gone." The fire captain stared at me. I gave him a polite, non-committal wave. This was when the cops got involved. 2 of them detached from their cars and walked towards me. One was older, with a deeply lined face that suggested he'd seen every stupid thing humanity had to offer, and was no longer surprised by any of it. His name tag read Miller. The other was younger, fitter, with a curious, energetic look in his eyes. His tag said Davis. Classic good cop, tired cop. "Sir, I'm Officer Miller. This is Officer Davis," the older cop said, his voice a gravelly monotone. "Can you explain what your neighbor means by spaceship things?" Before I could answer, a new combatant entered the arena. "He's a menace, a vigilante. He's operating an unauthorized illegal drone air force and violating federal airspace." Brenda. She stormed across my lawn, a clear violation of Article 7, trespassing on homeowner property without invitation, clutching a thick, 3-ring binder to her chest. She had hidden the jammer, but the righteous indignation was on full display. "Ma'am, please calm down," Officer Miller said, holding up a hand. "I will not calm down," she shrieked, jabbing a finger at me. "His contraptions filled the air with toxic chemicals. Think of the children, and Mabel Henderson's organic rose bushes. They're probably sterile now." I decided it was time to speak. "It's biodegradable, fire-suppressing foam, Brenda," I said, my voice dripping with forced patience. "The same kind they use at airports. The roses will be fine. The Hendersons' kitchen, on the other hand, would have been extra crispy if we'd waited for you to finish your little jamming session." Miller's head snapped towards me. "Jamming session?" Brenda's face went pale. "That's a baseless accusation." "Is it?" I tapped the side of my glasses. "I have the telemetry logs. I have a 4K video feed from my primary security camera with a 20x optical zoom. It shows you, on your porch, holding a handheld signal jammer and pointing it directly at my initial response drone." Officer Davis's eyes widened. He took a step forward. "Wait, you have a drone that can put out fires? And a backup fleet?" Brenda ignored him, focusing her rage on me. "Those things are a violation of HOA bylaws. Section 12, paragraph C, no aerial devices, kites, or unmanned aircraft may be operated from any lot without prior written approval from the Architectural Review Committee." She brandished her binder like a weapon. "They're also registered with the FAA, fully insured, and just saved a house from burning down," I retorted. "I'm pretty sure imminent threat to life and property supersedes the clause about kite flying, Brenda." Officer Miller rubbed the bridge of his nose, looking profoundly weary. "Okay, let's all take a breath." "Sir," he said, pointing at me, "you're saying you have drones that can fight fires?" "Correct. An automated emergency response system." "And you," he said, turning to Brenda, "are saying he's not allowed to fly them?" "He is a menace and a rule breaker," she insisted. "And you," he said, his gaze swinging back to me, "are saying she used an illegal signal jammer to try and stop you?" "That is precisely what I'm saying, officer, and I believe using such a device, especially during an emergency response, is a federal offense. I'd be happy to provide you and the FCC with a copy of the evidence." The entire dynamic shifted. This was no longer a petty neighborhood squabble. The words "federal offense" have a way of sucking the air out of a conversation. Brenda's face went from angry red to pasty white. Officer Davis looked like a kid on Christmas morning. "So, what's the payload capacity on these fire ants?" Davis asked excitedly. "Is that a proprietary foam delivery system? What kind of flight time do you get with a full load?" "Davis," Miller grunted, shooting him a look, "let's stick to the potential felonies for now, okay?" He turned back to me. "Sir, we're going to need a formal statement, and that evidence you mentioned." "Of course," I said. "I can airdrop the encrypted files to your department's server right now if you'd like." Miller just stared at me for a moment. Just put it on a thumb drive or something. We'll come by in a bit." He and Davis then turned to address Brenda. "Ma'am, we need to have a word with you as well, about that device you were allegedly holding." "I demand a lawyer," Brenda squawked, clutching her binder of rules like a shield. "This is harassment." As they escorted a protesting Brenda back towards her beige palace, the fire captain came over, shaking his head in disbelief. "In 20 years, he said, his mustache quivering slightly, "I have never ever seen anything like that. You got that thing out in less than 2 minutes?" "1 minute, 52 seconds from alarm to full suppression," I said, unable to resist checking the logs. He whistled, long and low. "Son, I don't know what the cops or the HOA lady are going to do, but from me and my crew, nice work." He clapped me on the shoulder and went back to his very confused, very impressed team. I looked at the foam-covered deck, the blinking lights of the emergency vehicles, and the crowd of neighbors who had gathered at a safe distance, all staring at my house with a newfound mixture of fear and awe. The fire was out, but the mess was just beginning. The next few days were a blur of officialdom. Officers Miller and Davis came back and took my formal statement. I gave them a thumb drive containing the neatly packaged evidence, high-resolution video of Brenda with the jammer, telemetry logs from Firefly 1 showing the exact moment and nature of the interference, and the flight data from the fire ants. Davis peppered me with questions about my server setup and encryption protocols until Miller finally dragged him away. They paid a visit to Brenda, who, true to her word, refused to say anything without a lawyer present. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip. I was either the local hero or a rogue supervillain, depending on who you asked. The Hendersons, for their part, couldn't have been more grateful. Mabel baked me a lemon meringue pie that was so good it almost made the whole ordeal worth it. Almost. Their deck, however, was a disaster. The fire department had done their due diligence, tearing away some of the siding to check for internal embers, and the whole structure was a charred, foam-stained wreck. George and Mabel were overwhelmed, talking about insurance adjusters and contractors with a sense of dread. "Don't worry about a thing," I told them over pie. "I'll handle it. Consider it a neighborhood watch fee." Which is how I met Gus. I found him through a local recommendation service. His profile said, "Gus's General Contracting. No frills, no fuss, just gets it done." He showed up in a beat-up Ford F1 150 with rust on the fenders and a toolbox in the back that looked like it had survived several wars. He was a man in his 60s, with a grizzled beard, calloused hands, and a perpetually skeptical squint. We stood on the Henderson's ruined deck, and I laid out my vision. "Okay, Gus," I began, pulling up a holographic schematic from the projector in my glasses, which I dimmed so he wouldn't think I was a complete lunatic. "We're going to rip all of this out. We'll replace the wooden joists with galvanized steel. The decking itself will be a high-density, fire-retardant composite. I want to integrate a network of thermal sensors under the planks, tied into a localized misting system." Gus stared at the space where the hologram was, then back at me. He chewed on an unlit cigar. "You want me to put sprinklers in a deck?" "Not sprinklers, misters. Less water damage in case of a false positive. They'll be connected to the internet, of course. The thermal grid will be able to pinpoint a heat source to within a square inch. Anything above 200 degrees Celsius that isn't the grill, and the system will activate, sending an alert to my phone, your phone, and the Hendersons' phones." Gus took the cigar out of his mouth. "My phone is a flip phone, kid. It makes calls. The only alert it gives me is when the battery's about to die." "We can get you a new one," I said brightly. "You're not touching my phone," he grumbled. He kicked at a charred piece of wood. "What's wrong with good old pressure-treated pine? Lasts 20 years if you seal it right." "Pine burns, Gus. Composite doesn't. We're also going to replace the vinyl siding on this section of the house with fiber cement siding. It's got a Class 1A fire rating." "So, let me get this straight," Gus said, leaning against a railing that was still sticky with foam residue. "You want me to build a deck that's fireproof, waterproof, connected to the World Wide Web, and can probably detect if a squirrel running across it has a fever?" "Essentially, yes," I said, "but it's more for detecting unauthorized heat sources, like a stray charcoal briquette, a discarded cigarette, or, a signal jammer that's overheating from being used to commit a federal crime." Gus just shook his head, a slow, bewildered motion. "I'm gonna need to charge you extra for the headache." "Understood," I said with a smile. While Gus was drawing up an estimate for his futuristic deck of Damocles, the counterattack I'd been expecting finally arrived. It didn't come via golf cart. It came via certified mail, a method of communication so serious it requires a signature. It was a thick envelope with the Maple Creek Estates HOA logo on it. Inside was a multi-page document that read like a declaration of war. Brenda, despite being under a federal investigation, had managed to convene an emergency disciplinary hearing. Me. I was the one being disciplined. The list of charges was a masterpiece of bureaucratic insanity. I sat at my kitchen counter and read them aloud to Jarvis. Charge 1. Operating an unlicensed private fire department in violation of county and state regulations. I'm pretty sure that's not a thing. "I can find no legal precedent for such a charge, Alex," Jarvis confirmed. Charge 2. Reckless endangerment of residents and property through the deployment of an untested aerial fleet. I scoffed. Untested? I've run over 2,000 simulations. It's more tested than the new stop sign they put at the end of the block. Charge 3. Unauthorized discharge of chemical substances onto community and private property. She's still on about the foam. Charge 4. Aesthetic terrorism via the deployment of unapproved aerial devices. Aesthetic terrorism. Did she really just call my life-saving drones ugly? I'll have her know they have a carbon fiber chassis with a very tasteful matte finish. A subjective assessment, but noted, said Jarvis. And the grand finale, charge 5. Conduct unbecoming a resident of Maple Creek Estates, thereby lowering the collective property value and disrupting the peace. They're blaming me for the sirens. The letter concluded by summoning me to a mandatory hearing in the community clubhouse in 3 days' time. My presence was required to answer for my actions. Failure to appear would result in an immediate finding of guilt and the levying of maximum allowable fines and sanctions. I put the letter down on the counter and took a deep breath. Brenda wasn't just doubling down. She was going all in. She was trying to use the full, petty power of the HOA to crush me before the federal investigation could crush her. It was a bold strategy. It was a stupid strategy. "Jarvis," I said, a slow grin spreading across my face. "Cancel my appointments for the next 3 days." "Certainly. May I ask the reason?" "I have to prepare for a trial." I picked up my glasses and started tapping at the air, opening files, schematics, and video timelines. Brenda was bringing a binder of rules to this fight. I was going to bring a data-driven, multimedia, high-tech smackdown. Her little PowerPoint presentation wasn't going to stand a chance. The Maple Creek Estates Community Clubhouse multipurpose room was exactly as depressing as it sounded. It was a beige box with a linoleum floor, fluorescent lights that hummed with existential dread, and the faint, lingering smell of stale coffee and microwave popcorn. Stacked in the corner were folding chairs and tables, relics of 100 joyless potlucks. Tonight, those chairs were arranged in neat rows, facing a long table where the HOA board sat like a tribunal of suburban deities. The room was packed. It seemed my little drone escapade was the most exciting thing to happen in Maple Creek since someone planted non-regulation petunias in 2017. I saw the Hendersons in the front row, looking nervous but supportive. I saw Gus, the contractor, leaning against the back wall, arms crossed, looking deeply skeptical of the entire process. And I saw neighbors I barely knew, their faces a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and the desperate hope of seeing some drama. At the center of the board's table sat Brenda, no longer president but still a board member, her face a mask of grim determination. The acting president, a timid man named Gerald, who looked terrified of his own shadow, nervously tapped a gavel on the table. "This emergency hearing of the Maple Creek Homeowners Association is now in session," he squeaked. "The matter before us is the list of infractions filed against the resident of 1212 Maple Lane, Mr. Alex Sterling." Brenda cleared her throat and stood up. She strode to a projector screen that was displaying the HOA logo. In her hand, she held a remote. This was her moment. "Esteemed board members, fellow residents," she began, her voice quivering with manufactured gravitas. "We are here today to discuss a grave threat to our community. A threat of recklessness, of rule-breaking, and of a rogue technology that jeopardizes our safety, our privacy, and our property values." She clicked the remote. A slide appeared with a blurry, pixelated picture of one of my drones she'd probably taken with her phone from a mile away. Above it, in big red letters, was the word "Danger." For the next 15 minutes, Brenda put on a performance worthy of a daytime soap opera. She spun a tale of terror, painting me as a mad scientist who had unleashed an army of uncontrolled death machines into our peaceful skies. She used stock photos of explosions and fires she'd clearly downloaded from the internet. She spoke of unknown chemicals and potential carcinogens raining down from the sky. Her arguments were entirely emotional, completely devoid of facts, and tailored to scare the older, less tech-savvy residents in the room. "He claims his actions were heroic," she concluded, her voice rising to a crescendo. "But what is heroic about breaking the rules that hold our community together? What is heroic about taking the law into his own hands? If we allow this, what's next? Private security robots patrolling our streets? Laser fences? Where does it end?" She sat down to a smattering of nervous applause from her cronies. Gerald, the acting president, swallowed hard. Thank you, Brenda. Mr. Sterling, do you have a response?" I stood up, hands in my pockets. "I do." I walked calmly to the front of the room. I didn't have a remote or a laptop. I just tapped the side of my glasses. "Jarvis," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Project to screen." The HOA logo vanished from the screen, replaced instantly by a crisp, high-definition display from my personal server. The room murmured. "Brenda has presented you with a narrative of fear and speculation," I began. "I'm just going to present you with the data. This is thermal imaging from my home's weather sensor, timestamped at 2:14 p.m. last Saturday." The screen showed a heat map of the neighborhood. The Hendersons' house had a bright, angry red spot on it that was rapidly growing. As you can see, a fire had started. Based on the material composition of the deck and siding and the wind speed at the time, my system projected a 94% chance of the fire reaching the attic within 7 minutes. Click. I mentally swiped to the next file. This is the flight log and video feed from my first response drone, Firefly 1, launched at 2:15 p.m. The screen showed the drone's eye view, a smooth ascent and a direct path to the fire. It was 20 seconds from deploying suppressant foam when this happened. The video dissolved into static. On the side of the screen, telemetry data scrolled rapidly, showing the catastrophic signal loss. A vector graphic appeared, a red line that shot from the drone's position directly to one house on the map, Brenda's house. Another gasp rippled through the room. "This was not an accident," I said calmly. "This was a deliberate act of signal jamming, an act that is, I might add, a federal crime, but that's another matter." Click. Fortunately, I believe in redundancy. This is the launch of the backup fleet at 2:16 p.m. The screen split into 5 smaller windows, showing the synchronized launch of the fire ants. The low, hornet-like buzz of their motors filled the clubhouse speakers. It was cinematic. "And this," I said, as the 5 video feeds showed the foam being deployed from multiple angles, extinguishing the fire in a matter of seconds, "is what Brenda calls reckless endangerment. This is the aesthetic terrorism that saved the Hendersons' home." The final image was a side-by-side comparison. A simulation of the projected fire damage after 7 minutes, the entire back of the house consumed, next to a photo of the actual, minimal damage after my drones had intervened. The evidence was irrefutable. I finished with the pièce de résistance. Finally, for anyone who still doubts the source of the jamming. The screen changed to the zoomed-in, 4K video from my security camera. There was Brenda, clear as day on her porch, holding the black jammer, a smug look on her face. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear a pin drop on the linoleum. Brenda was sputtering, her face chalk white. This is doctored footage. It's a deep fake. He's a tech wizard. He could have..." Her desperate rambling was cut short by the sound of the clubhouse doors opening at the back of the room. Everyone turned. Standing there were Officer Miller and Officer Davis. Miller's face was grim. In his hand, he held a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside it was Brenda's signal jammer. "Brenda Mills," Officer Miller said, his voice echoing in the silent room. "We have a warrant issued by a federal judge to confiscate this device. The FCC and the FAA have been in touch. They're taking this very seriously." Davis gave me a subtle nod from the back of the room. The game was over. Brenda looked at the cops, at the damning footage on the screen, at the stunned faces of her neighbors. She crumpled into her chair, defeated. Mr. Henderson stood up then, his voice shaking with emotion. "That woman tried to stop him," he said, pointing first at Brenda, then at me. "And that young man saved my house. He saved my wife and me from having to see our memories go up in smoke. That's not a menace. That's a hero." Checkmate. The HOA board, which had been sitting in stunned silence, was jolted into action. Gerald, the timid president, seemed to find a backbone for the first time in his life. He called for an immediate vote. The dismissal of all charges against me was unanimous. That was followed by a second, more momentous vote. a motion to immediately suspend Brenda from the HOA board, pending a full investigation into her actions and her potential misuse of HOA funds to purchase the illegal jammer. It also passed unanimously. Brenda didn't even vote. She just sat there, staring blankly as her tiny beige kingdom crumbled around her. The meeting adjourned in a flurry of excited chatter. People I'd never spoken to came up to shake my hand, to apologize for doubting me, to ask questions about my drones. It was overwhelming. Gus clapped me on the back, a rare smile cracking his grizzled face. "Okay, kid," he grunted. "I'm impressed. That was better than daytime television." In the weeks that followed, Maple Creek Estates underwent a quiet transformation. Brenda became a recluse, buried under a mountain of legal fees and facing serious federal charges. Word on the street was she was being forced to sell her house. The beige tyrant's reign was officially over. My status in the neighborhood changed overnight. I was no longer the weird tech guy. I was now the cool weird tech guy. The guy who saved the Hendersons. The neighborhood kids started leaving crayon drawings of my fire ants on my doorstep. Neighbors who used to give my satin finish mailbox the side eye now waved enthusiastically and asked for my advice on everything from Wi-Fi extenders to smart thermostats. It was nice. A little strange, but nice. The Hendersons' new deck was completed. It was a thing of beauty, a sleek composite masterpiece that was stronger, safer, and would outlive us all. Gus did incredible work, even managing to integrate my thermal sensors and misting system with only a moderate amount of complaining. On his last day, as he was packing up his ancient tools, he stood admiring the finished product. "Have to admit," he said, chewing on his unlit cigar, "this internet deck is kinda neat. Sent me an alert yesterday. Said a squirrel had a core temperature of 101 degrees. I laughed. "That was a calibration test, Gus, but I'm glad it's working." I handed him his final check, with a hefty bonus added on. He looked at it, then at me, and nodded. "You ever get tired of playing with your computers, you give me a call. You're not half bad at measuring things." Coming from Gus, it was the highest compliment imaginable. That evening, I was finally able to enjoy that moment of peace I'd been trying for weeks ago. I was on my own deck, a cold beer in hand, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors far more interesting than beige. The Blade Runner hummed quietly across the lawn. Everything was calm. Then, of course, Jarvis spoke in my ear. "Motion alert at the front door, Alex." I sighed, pulling up the video feed in my glasses. On my doorstep stood Gerald, the new official HOA president. He was nervously clutching a plate of what looked like cookies, wrapped in plastic. He looked up at my camera, knowing I was watching. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Alex? Gerald from the HOA board here. We were just wondering, the association is looking to upgrade our neighborhood watch program. You know, make it a bit more 21st century. He fidgeted with the plate of cookies. "And we were wondering if you might offer consultations?" I watched him on the feed, a timid man offering a baked good tribute to the neighborhood's resident tech god. He wasn't afraid, he was asking for help. They had finally realized that technology wasn't a threat to their suburban harmony, it was just a tool, and I just happened to have the best tools. A slow, satisfied grin spread across my face. I leaned back in my chair, taking a long sip of my beer. "Jarvis," I said, "draft up a proposal for Project Neighborhood Guardian. And make it expensive."